Well, more than 200,000 people have been taking to the streets of the Philippines these past few days, protesting against government corruption and the misuse of flood mitigation funds. The country has been hit by a raft of powerful storms in recent weeks, which have exposed long-term issues with disaster management systems. Let's delve more into this and bring in Ronald Holmes, Professor of Political Science at De La Salle University in Manila. Professor Holmes, welcome to the program. Now, firstly, can you give us a bit of background, with these protests that are happening about where these billions of dollars in flood mitigation funds have gone? What's the basis of the claims that the money has been mismanaged?
Well, the basis would really be the investigations that have been launched either in our legislature or even by an independent commission. One of the findings initially of the investigations that out of about 8,000 flood control projects, there are about more than 400 that are inexistent, that were reported to have been completed. But basically, after looking at the sites, they did not exist. So the calculation right now is that this basically means about more than 1 trillion pesos, more than 33 billion Australian dollars for that matter.
Yeah.
And that's a higher limit. And that's a sizable portion of the total budget of the Philippines, about 5% also for gross domestic product.
Yes,
if that figure is correct.
That is a lot of money. And has the cost of the funds that are not there been exposed by at least the two major tornadoes in recent weeks that have shown that the infrastructure and resources are struggling to meet the requirements of residents who are in the line of these massive storms?
Definitely, the two typhoons that happened recently with about more than 200 deaths, I think, in the earlier typhoon that hits our central Visayan region, they sparked the outrage. No? They sustained the outrage against this grand-scale corruption that has happened. And we expect more protests within the month, up to the end of the month. I don't think that the protests will subside until government shows proof that they're sincere in terms of looking for and eventually holding accountable the people who are involved in these corrupt activities.
Yeah, so realistically, though, will these protests have an impact to force the government into action? Could heads roll and any chance that these missing billions will be recovered?
Well, in terms of heads rolling, there have been some resignations on the part of cabinet members, which have been accepted by the president. The executive secretary, who is basically the first among equals in the cabinet, has resigned, and the resignation has been accepted. And also the budget secretary also resigned, and her resignation was also accepted. We don't know exactly the number of charges to be leveled against incumbent officials right now, both in the executive and the legislature. Unfortunately, in our history, many of these charges go to court, but the conviction rate is low. And that's largely because of the power that many of these individuals hold. It's also a testament to the difficulties that we get in terms of securing justice and accountability for levels of corruption that we've seen in the past. No? Although this one is definitely surpasses the scale that we've seen in the past years.
Yes, and how do you expect the President Bongbong Marcos to respond to this?
Well, he would have to really be hands-off in terms of the investigations, because some of the people who are being accused of having been engaged, who actually outwitted him, are people who are very close to him, including his cousin, who used to be the Speaker of the lower house. So that's really something that people are giving attention to. Will Bongbong Marcos, will the president basically be indifferent towards investigations, or would he intervene? Hopefully he does not intervene, because what will happen here is that there are a number of opportunistic groups in the Philippines who might use this in order to eventually justify their calls for his resignation. And some of these people are with the camp that he has been in conflict with, the camp of the vice president.
Yes, of course, the Philippines is no stranger to powerful typhoons in the decades. It is prone to these massive storms. But how far back does the issue of this mismanagement of funds go back in terms of improving flood control measures?
It's not just flood control. Basically, if you look at the total budget of the country, well, a large proportion goes to public infrastructure. Every year, I think the estimates that we have about 280,000 public infrastructure projects. And that's a sizable amount. It takes a large proportion of the budget. And the problem that we've had is that about 10 to 30% or even 40%, depending on the project. In the case of flood control projects, it was revealed that about 40 to 50% actually went to the pockets of people who were involved, proponents of those projects, and only a measly amount would eventually go to secure the completion of the project. And worse, a number of these, hundreds of these projects are actually inexistent. So that's the problem, really. It's pervasive corruption and the impunity that a number of members of the executive and the legislature have involved themselves with in the past few years. And it's a continuing problem in the country.
Yes, and then do you believe this level of corruption and impunity has gotten better or worse in recent years in the Philippines?
It's definitely worse because the last scandal that we had in terms of corruption, we were just talking about maybe hundreds of millions of Australian dollars. You're talking here of 33 billion. It's similar to a major economic shock if you talk about economic loss. We've seen our gross domestic product, the growth rate, for example, in the last quarter was less than what the government expected. And I think one of the reasons for that lower growth rate is really the political noise that has been caused by this corruption scandal with regard to flood mitigation projects. So unless the government really takes a sincere effort in really hailing to court and eventually securing the conviction of people that might even be close to the president, we might see greater questions of legitimacy and a loss of credibility on the part of the national administration.
Okay, Professor Ronald Holmes, really appreciate your insights there. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Virj.